Hi and welcome to another C++ lesson. My name is David and today we will be talking about if conditions. In case you haven't watched any of our previous lessons, I strongly recommend doing so by clicking on the link down below in the description. So as I mentioned before, today we will be looking at the if conditions. So before explaining why if conditions are useful in programming, I'll just use some examples to make it as clear as possible. So just imagine you have some value, random, let's just call it value test. We'll just declare it with a 10. And at some point in the program, you just want to check if this value is 10, if it's below 10 or above 10. So let's just input some output syntax, calling it above 10. Oops, fingers are too big today. And this with an end line. Copy this. And we will say something like it's below 10 and equals 10. So, okay, for the first statement, we want to check if actually value test is above 10. And we will say something, well, if the value test is bigger than 10, let's just execute this. For the second one, we will use, smaller than 10, then it's below 10. And the last one, that's a critical part, because here's where a lot of the errors occur. We will check if, this is not the way I wanted it to be. This is wrong as well. Okay, we will now check if the value test equals 10. Now, a lot of people just type in equal and think this will actually check the condition if the value test is in fact 10 or equals 10 at this point. But that's wrong. This gives value test the value 10. If you want to check for if it's equal or not, you have to type it twice actually. So this is in this condition, you're asking, is value test in fact, does it equal 10? This declares, like up here, the variable to the value 10. So to see the error when it occurs, just check and it will actually tell me it equals 10, of course, because it just jumps in here and gives it an output. But if you watch closely, it tells you actually in German, I will translate, wrong operator. It's a wrong Boolean context, use equal instead. So, and this is the huge problem of this whole statement, because actually it's 10 if we test the program properly without this funky thing happening right here. Okay, it will actually give us the right input, but we're using a wrong statement right here. And imagine if the program is not like half a size big, but instead 200 pages long. It's very, very, very hard to see the error inside the bigger picture, right? So to correct this error, we will be using equal instead of equal. And to show something in addition, we can use these brackets instead of not using them. And we will be able to use additional lines in our statement of if. Like something like, isn't this great? So if you're not using these brackets, it will only output the first line after the if statement and not the second one. This will be just something not touched by the if statement at all. So to make it even clearer what I mean, let's just say we are changing this value to 10, and we will enter this, or copying this statement down here, where it tells you, okay, this isn't this great for the value below 10. So now it equals 10, and some people think this would be shouldn't be displayed because it's part of the if statement. But if you actually forget this, this isn't part of the if statement at all. It's part of the int main program and will always be shown because it's not bound to any conditions or so what. So let's just enter this and you will see, isn't this great, equals 10. So in fact it equals 10, but this isn't part of this condition anymore because you didn't put this in any brackets, right? So in other possibilities, what you can do with if is to say, all right, let's check if this value is below 10. Something like, is this value below 10? We will see, say, below, just to make it as easy as possible. And we can say, well, else something like must be bigger than, must be bigger than 10. And here you're saying something like, well, let's check this condition if it equals 10. If this condition isn't true, it will automatically jump to else. Okay, so this is some default condition being true whenever the statement up here is false. And you can even extend this by saying, well, if, or sorry, else, a lot of typos today, I'm so sorry, bigger than 10, we will just say something like bigger, let's call it smaller instead up here to say smaller, bigger, and this must be equal 10. Okay, if this makes sense. So it will first check, well, is it smaller than 10? Output smaller. Is it bigger than 10? Output bigger. If it's not bigger than 10 and not smaller than 10, well, then it must be 10 or something else in total, but that's not important. It could be something completely different, like a like some sign, ASCII code, whatever. But just for the sake of argument, just let us just stay by numbers, or with numbers, sorry, and say, okay, if it's not smaller than 10, not bigger than 10, then it must in fact be equal 10 to get a true argument. So just to remind you guys, else is just something to close the whole testing argument here. If you really are looking for something or want to check some values in and to condition some statements, that's it. It's not necessary to use else in every single command, but in some cases it's very, very clean programming if you use else instead of not using it. But that's actually a topic about software engineering rather than talking about pure coding when you're learning it for the first time. So, and to continue, let's say you want to check if a value is in between 10 and 20. Let's just change the value to 15. And you want to check, well, is this value in between certain numbers or certain values? The very, very best thing you can do is pack more conditions than one inside your if statement. For example, you want to say, all right, instead of using two separate statements, you will say something like, well, if the value is bigger than 10, that's 15, for example, and it's actually smaller than 20, we can say it's between 10 and 20. And we just say something like it's false to make some foolish statement. And these operators, it's the AND operator, using it twice. You have to use it twice, because if you only use it once, it's a reference, but that's something for a whole different lesson or different topic. For today, just keep in mind this tells you, okay, this is an AND, a logical AND. These values have to be true in order for this to be output, or to be shown in the program. So let's test this just to make sure we're not doing some sketchy thing. We will see indeed it's between 10 and 20. Okay, this is odd that I wrote this out instead of just using the number to make it easier. Okay, so it's working. What if you want a number which can be below 10 or above 20? You don't want any value bigger or between 10 and 20. That's something. Or it could be smaller than 10, but it could actually be bigger than 20, but the conditions do not have to be true all at once. So let's just check 9 and say something. Well, if the value test is smaller than 10, or this is an or, I'm sorry, it's bigger than 20, it's between, or it's smaller 10 and bigger, or bigger 20. We will leave this at 15 just to make sure we'll get this else if this value isn't, or this condition isn't set to true. Test this and you will see, I'm sorry, it's false, just because this value isn't between 10 and 20. So if we change this to, let's say 5, it will tell me, okay, it's smaller than 10 or it's bigger than 20, but every single condition does not have to be true. Only one of them, not both of them. If I say something foolish like this, well, the value has to be bigger than 20, but it has to be smaller than 10. It's a condition which cannot be true at any time, because no value is smaller than 10 or bigger than 20 at once. So that's a big factor, or a big step, or let's say statement where a lot of errors occur in programming. So, and not to make this to a 2-hour lecture about if and else, I think that's everything you need to know about if and else conditions in C++. If you have any questions regarding this topic or other topics, just let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked the video. And I would really like to see you in the next video. Take care, stay healthy. Bye-bye.